Hey everybody, my name is Paul Esden Jr., aka Boy Green, and welcome to Front Office View. Finally, we have a name, baby, and it's spectacular. And Front Office View, you guys may have been watching the show for a bunch of weeks and months, but finally we have a name associated with it, which is awesome. And really, the name of the show is what the show is. We get a front office perspective from former NFL general manager Randy Mueller, and we're going to be going through all kinds of wonderful NFL topics. So it's the same show, but we just slapped a name on it. So on top of the button pressing, we also have a name for this puppy. So feel free to show your support wherever you're watching. Randy, welcome. Fantastic. It's great to be here. It's got to mean something good. If they decided to say, okay, I guess we're going to name it, I guess it's got to be a good sign.
We've advanced, buddy. We've advanced to the front office type show that we all kind of envisioned this becoming. So kudos to the people at Heavy for giving us this platform, and anxious to be on with you for a long time. We've developed a pretty good kinship through this, and I'm glad, like you say, we have an official name and kind of made it official, so to speak.
100%. So, yeah, shout out to all the wonderful people behind the scenes. You see all these cool graphics and everything else. So, Vinny, Marina, and all the wonderful people that make this happen. Shout out to each and every one of you. And shout out to the fans. Of course, this wouldn't be possible without you guys interacting and supporting. So, without further ado, let's dive right in. And I'm going to be honest, this was immediately topic number one for me when we got this party started. And that is very much Odell Beckham Jr. getting Monopoly money. I just, Randy, this was stunning, and I'd love to hear your perspective because this is so fascinating on a lot of different levels. Odell Beckham Jr., for those who missed it, got a one-year deal from the Baltimore Ravens with $15 million in guarantees. It can reach $18 million with what has been described as quote-unquote reachable incentives. Just simply, Randy, how did a player of OBJ that did not play at all last season get that kind of guarantee, which was among the highest guarantees of any free agent wide receiver this offseason?
Well, I'll tell you what, there's so many levels like you had just mentioned, Paul. I think it comes down to this. And sometimes, and I've been in this boat a few times in my career, you just got to buy the player. You got to put all of that cautious planning of financials off to the side and just say, hey, this is what we need to do. And I thought it was interesting. We heard no rumor of this, right? We heard no talk of this coming up to him actually announcing, or somebody announcing from the Ravens that, hey, we've got a deal done. So that told me this kind of happened quickly and behind the scenes, and it was no, negotiating per se. I think the Ravens offered him so much more than he had on the table. He was able to make a quick decision on it because he knew he had nothing like this. I don't think it had a lot to do with Lamar Jackson, other than I think Lamar's going to take the money, and his hope now is that Lamar is the quarterback or that they find somebody better than Lamar. But I don't think the two were necessarily meant to be tied together. And three, I have kudos to the Ravens for, they've been criticized the last few years for not addressing the perimeter, not addressing the receiver position. It's been a struggle for them. And that, frankly, they've swung and missed on a few guys. So why not take a proven commodity like Odell and throw that money at him and take all the guesswork out of it, nail it down? Sometimes it's about timing. And this was a timing. The timing was right for them to go ahead and make a splash, make a deal. And right now, I think getting off the bus, he's the best receiver they have. So it makes sense on a lot of fronts. And I say that, obviously he's coming off an ACL 18 months ago or whatever it is. It's close to that. So there's some ifs. There's a little risk, obviously. But the thing that I think is awesome for the Ravens, at least from this angle, they had conviction for their evaluations and put their money where their mouth was. And so I like that. I don't like teams that want to nickel and dime at the wrong time. This was not a time for nickel and diming. And could they have gotten him for less? Maybe. Might have taken a few more weeks, or it might have taken until after the draft. They also, I think, Paul, took a peek at what's available draft-wise at the receiver position. Not a great group. Not one that they could expend a high pick on to get an Odell Beckham Jr. So I think it makes sense on several different levels.
Well, Randy, I'll say this. People have called, I could speak for myself, but probably for both of us seeing in the comments, people have called us a lot of names for a long time. But one of the things that is right that they call you, Randy, is consistent. You had a very similar take to when the Chiefs, who a lot of people were like, what the hell are they doing signing Jawan Taylor, who was a free agent at the time, But again, the belief that they have this strong level of conviction, both on the money and their process, that we may not have seen it at the NFL level. Again, right tackle to left tackle on the money that he received, but they just believed it and they went after it. And you respected the hell out of that, Randy, from that show. And in this similar sense, while the NFL is making jokes about this OBJ Baltimore thing, it seems like you have, again, a similar level of respect for that level of conviction from the Ravens front office.
No doubt about it. The Ravens front office and really throughout their organization has always been, or my experience has led to me to believe this, they always are measured. They know exactly what they're doing. They didn't do this off the cuff, willy-nilly, as a knee-jerk reaction to anything else. They had a plan. They had an evaluation. They compared this to the other options. And like I say, maybe it's in the draft, maybe it's other free agents that are available. And this made the most sense to them. And to me, they wanted to knock it out right now and get it done. And sometimes, I've been there, you just have to pay. And sometimes you have to overpay. And hey, OBJ was in the right spot at the right time. I don't think he had anything like this on the table, like I said. And I think the Ravens swooped in, made a deal, and God bless them for getting it done quickly. And I think they have a really good player. In a lot of ways, is a good fit for them.
Yeah, and to your point, Randy, OBJ speaking earlier today had his introductory press conference with the Baltimore Ravens. He confirmed one of the things that you mentioned, because a lot of people said, okay, as they're trying to rationalize and understand the money that's involved here for OBJ, people have speculated on social media, this has to be a direct tie to Lamar. While maybe the people that don't believe OBJ is worth the $18 million, they say, well, he's worth it a little bit more if that leads to that, so to speak. But to your point, OBJ earlier today said he got zero assurances, whether from Lamar or the team, that he would be playing with Lamar Jackson. But he said he signed here and knowing that there's a possibility, as he described it, to play with Lamar. So that speaks a little bit to it for some of the people that have been trying to connect those dots and force that in.
Yeah, I think he was the best option for the Ravens, like I said. And when you break down his skill set and where it's at, when he got hurt in the Super Bowl 2 years ago with the Rams, he may have been the best player on the field at that time. He was really good by the time that season ended with the Rams. He had integrated himself into the system that they run there. The McVay offense was on the same page as the quarterback, kind of knew what exactly they wanted for him, and ended up being a productive player for them especially the last month of the season. So I think they know what they're getting. I think whether Lamar is their quarterback or not, it's a great get for them. It's a good fit. I think others have tried this, but it always came down to a nickel and dime type negotiation, and then about guarantees and this or that. The Ravens pushed all their chips to the table. So I think it's a good move, and I think they're getting a good player. His skill set, that being able to accelerate off the ball, to get in and out of breaks, to catch balls in a big radius, which means he doesn't have to have everything pinpointed his way. It doesn't have to be a perfect pass for him, because he can catch it, as we know, all around. His catch radius is giant, and that matters as well, especially if a guy like Lamar is throwing it to him. I wouldn't say that's Lamar's strength, is as a pinpoint passer. This guy can make catches even though it might not be perfect, and he can run after the catch. All elements that, in my opinion, the Ravens have lacked the last 2 or 3 years.
Let me ask you this, Randy, because it's interesting. So OBJ signs a 1-year deal. A lot of people from the outside of the organization have speculated that wide receiver should be a big need for this Baltimore team heading into the draft, which, by the way, is 2 weeks from today. Looking forward to our shows as we continue to get closer to the NFL draft, that is. Would that affect if you were the Ravens or a person on the outside and you thought the Ravens needed a wide receiver? Did the signing of OBJ change that, considering it's only a 1-year deal? And, teams don't draft. I think that's a common misconception. Teams don't just draft for the right now need that they need. It's always a couple steps ahead.
I think that you've hit it on the head. I think, for one, as I mentioned earlier, it's not a great draft for receivers. Mm-hmm. 2, the Ravens have other needs as well that I think they'll address with that first pick or 2. It just makes sense for them. And although it is a 1-year deal, there's no guarantee that it won't extend beyond this at some point. If the sure. Dating is good, they'll probably get married at some point. That's one way to look at it. So I think there's very little cap risk in the future. There's very little financial risk in the future. So I think the Ravens are willing to roll the dice on a 1-year deal. And who knows, at the end of it, if he's the Odell Beckham of old, they always have tags that they can use as well. So there's no guarantee that he'd walk out the door after 1 year. Plus, I think if there's success, he'd be crazy to leave again. He's been with 3 teams already. I don't think he wants to continue to do one-year deals around the league. It just doesn't make sense for his development in a locker room and to create the culture that John Harbaugh is looking for.
One more here on OBJ before we move forward, Randy. How much gas does he have left in the tank? That is a viral question on social media because depending on who you ask, people feel differently based on the age, the couple ACL surgeries that he's had. But when he's played and he's been healthy, he's been among the best receivers in all of football.
I think his numbers are down, but I think there's reason to understand it. His numbers were down at the end a little bit in New York, but they really went down in Cleveland, whether the coaching staff in Cleveland, the system wasn't the best for him. We all know that's a run-oriented play-action pass system that Kevin Stefanski runs with the Browns. I don't think that was real conducive to him putting up big numbers, and he wasn't with the Rams long enough to accrue any numbers. So I think when you watch the tape on him, you're getting kind of what I described earlier. If he's healthy, and you got to assume that your medical people know what they're doing, and they're going to tell you, hey, he's going to be this or he's going to be that. He still has explosion. He still can get in and out of breaks. He's still a very high football IQ guy. He can find soft spots. He reads coverage well. He'll get on the same page with the quarterback no matter what. And at the end of the day, he can get away from people, Paul. And they cover you at this level, so you have to get away from him. And guess what? When they do cover you, he can still catch when he's covered. And I don't think any of those things have changed because of the ACLs.
100%. I love it. Again, the ability to separate, you can't teach that, as my mama used to say. All right, let's throw another one in here. Let's start playing some offseason musical chairs. There is a lot happening here with players who could be on the move, who are on the move, and just general news. We'll go to the New York Giants first. Saquon Barkley, the news has come out that he does not plan on signing his franchise tag tender ahead of voluntary workouts for the New York Giants. And I'll start off here, Randy. Do you believe Barkley and his agents misdiagnosed the value of the running back position? Because reportedly, again, we have to go off reports. We don't know all the offers, but he reportedly had a multi-year deal in front of him that would pay him around $12 million. That's what people are saying. The highest part of the market is $16 million per year. So apparently, obviously, Saquon said no thanks on the $12 million. He must have thought he was going to get more, or other teams should get involved, and maybe the money could get crazy. And apparently, when the Giants saw that the market didn't develop for running backs in free agency, they yanked the offer off the table, and now we're kind of in this awkward place here. Did Barkley and his representation, in your mind, knowing kind of all that information, did they misdiagnose the market, or is there something else going on here?
Well, I think the market is what you can get. That's really, in reality, what the market, reveals. So in this case, when you have a tag on somebody, we can talk about the numbers that are associated with the franchise at running back position. Doesn't mean you're going to get that. And the long range deal that they put in front of him, obviously the Giants thought was a good deal. Will they reinvent that in time to throw him a safety life preserver to bring him back in? Possibly. I think he's a little bit unique in that he has a skill set above and beyond that probably compares to the Zeke Elliott's and the Mixons of the world, and these guys that have gotten big money, no doubt. I just don't. I think that ship has sailed. I don't think he's ever going to get that, and I don't think the Giants feel like they have to pay it. I know this: if Barkley, have you ever seen a franchise guy that's tagged that said, "I'm happy about it and I want to come and I'm going to sign it right now"? It doesn't happen very often. So all of these actions have to be fairly predictable in the Giants' terms. They knew this was coming, but at the end of the day, they also know if Saquon Barkley wants to play football, it's going to be for the Giants, and it's going to be on a one-year deal for X amount of dollars, or we can sign him to a longer-term deal with even more guarantees. So I think it's all about timing. Everybody can say what they want until the pavement hits the road and it's September 1. Here's the other thing. I don't think they care if he's there or not. They might say what they want, but you're not going to play him in preseason anyway. And it's not like he doesn't know the system. He already spent time there. So that gives them a chance to maybe look at some other options. I mean, hey, I spent a lot of years in Seattle. Kurt Warner, the running back from Penn State, was our guy. We went through every year and never played him a snap. These really good premier running backs, that's the last thing you want to do is wear and tear them in an offseason program or in preseason. So I think in time, cooler heads will prevail. I think these actions are very predictable and part of a franchise tag attachment with a player and agent. It just takes time, and the course of time will play these out, and he'll end up being in the Giants' fold, even if it's September 1, so be it.
Again, perhaps more media fodder than actuality in
Well,
terms of
yeah.
how we perceive some of this.
But it's all
In terms,
understandable. It's
of
understandable
course.
that these angles are pursued, and it's as much about the art of negotiating as anything else. And as we all know, timing spurs deals, and there's really no timing to make this happen right now.
100%. Again, you guys are watching Front Office View. It feels great to say the name, so I will try to do it as much as possible, baby. Show your support. Make sure you guys are liking the video wherever you guys are watching. And of course, feel free to subscribe as well. We see your comments. Keep them coming, baby, right here on the show. Speaking of people skipping voluntary, I throw in the quotes, voluntary offseason workouts, DeAndre Hopkins has joined that group. And interestingly, he even went on Instagram Live in the middle of the Cardinals' voluntary workouts, which was kind of funny on social media. And there have been trade rumors all around him this offseason. And even reportedly, the Cardinals said you could go seek a trade out on your own if you'd like. Randy, what do you make of this? There's kind of a lot of variables with Hopkins. Obviously, when he's on the field, he's a dynamic superstar, but he's going to be 31. He's missed 15 games the last 2 years, and he still has 2 years of mega money left on his deal. What's the value here of DeAndre Hopkins?
Good, all good points, Paul. And also from the standpoint of the Cardinals angle, it's not like they're going to make a push right now. They're in a rebuilding mode again. New coach, new GM. They've got at least some retooling, if not rebuilding. So I don't know that Hopkins's age, salary, and skill level matches up to where the Cardinals are right now. The fact that they gave him permission to seek a trade tells me that they would listen to all offers. So I think it's hard. You mentioned 31 years old. To get the amount of money that he's getting now and be paid that from another team, I think is pie in the sky. I don't know that that's going to happen. You see players at this age on the decline salary-wise instead of on the incline salary-wise. I'm not sure what the hang-up for him is. If he just doesn't want to be there, that's up to him. But I think these are all parts of sometimes the ugliness of front office player negotiations. You just have these. It's not that like anybody has done something wrong. This is just parts of doing business sometimes with these bigger money, higher profile guys. You're going to have some mudslinging per se. And I don't think either one of these sides are against each other. It's just part of the process. And I think at some point, again, timing will dictate that it plays out. Maybe they do find a home for somebody, for Hopkins when somebody gets hurt with another team. It could be in preseason, could be that, hey, we don't get this in the draft. Now we need to go find another receiver. Maybe they get him to take a reduced number, or at least reduce his cap number and push some money out. It might make sense to a team. Like I said, there's not a ton of receivers in this draft that I can say being a starting receiver in the NFL. So the Cardinals may be able to move him for a reasonable price after the draft, like I say, for a team that is still looking for a need at wide receiver.
Yeah, let me do another follow-up here on Hopkins. It's interesting. I know you can't speak for all GMs when I ask this question, so it's your own perspective, the front office view. Wink! Branding, baby. But yeah, on DeAndre Hopkins, Albert Breer had an interesting report in his mailbag that one of the things that rubs some teams the wrong way as they've been potentially exploring trading for Hopkins is he doesn't practice all the time. He kind of marches to the beat of his own drum, so to speak. And for some organizations like, I don't know, the New England Patriots, who have Bill O'Brien and that kind of connection, maybe they would be like, yeah, that's not happening here, pal. Is that a real thing? Because Albert Breer said that could rub some teams the wrong way. Is that a real thing? Is that not really a big deal because he's such a really good player? What do you make of that?
I wouldn't say it's a big deal. I'd say it's a giant deal. It is really a big deal for especially some coaches, and for coaches that are trying to build culture wherever they might be. Any new coach, any new staff, like the Cardinals per se, they want people that are buying in and want to practice because they've got a lot of things they've got to get accomplished before that first game. So that will eliminate some teams without a doubt. No veteran coach, and I've been around some of the great ones, Saban, Holmgren, all these guys. If you can't practice, it's going to be a problem. And I'm not saying it's the Junction Boys where you got to buckle up and go full pads for 4 days a week. That's not it. But you've got to get your work done, and your teammates got to be able to adjust to where you're at, what you're doing, especially the timing of which, if you're a receiver or a perimeter player, all that timing has to figure in. So I would think that's a big deal. I think it will definitely hurt the market for him if he's known to be a guy who doesn't want to practice. Everybody knows that. And that'll be a hard pill for a lot of coaches, especially veteran coaches, to swallow. It it's not conducive to playing good offensive football when your key parts are never out there together.
No, and that makes a lot of sense. But those two factors could be interesting to watch in the Hopkins scenario. Again, we keep talking about the 2023 NFL draft, which is 2 weeks from today in terms of the first round. And if the wide receiver, group isn't as great as everyone thinks it is, maybe these options like OBJ or Hopkins become all that more attractive. So it will be fascinating to kind of dive in to see what that is. Again, maybe some more action on that as we get a little closer to the NFL draft, or even the injuries, as you mentioned, which are always a factor. You hold on to an asset, you get closer, injury happens, and all of a sudden perhaps that becomes more attractive with teams kind of coming out of the woodwork, and you get the price perhaps whatever you were seeking from there, Randy. So that could be possible there.
As a betting man, Paul, I would bet he ends up somewhere else at some point. That's the way I would focus. If I was a Cardinal fan, probably means he's going to be on the move, just a matter of when, not if.
Fair enough. Let's go to the Indianapolis Colts. They came out this week and said, when asked about Lamar Jackson, said, we're focusing on the NFL draft. But, of course, sitting at number 4 where they currently stand, there is no guarantee, first off, the quarterback they want or they seek or they want or desire falls to number 4. So, once again, we bring up the Lamar Jackson possibility. Is this a fit for a team that's really swung at the pinata at the veteran quarterback thing, and it really hasn't worked out? So I guess we'll start there first, Randy. If you attempted, let's put you in the shoes of Chris Ballard, who attempted multiple times at the veteran thing. Phillip Rivers, Matt Ryan, Jacoby Brissett even is where they went. Although the veteran, I guess, quote unquote, is a little loose there as opposed to the other guys. But if you missed consistently on veteran quarterback, would that dissuade you from diving into veteran quarterback again, or is each its own personal case? Let's start there.
I would say that has played in Indianapolis on all fronts. I don't think they'll find a veteran quarterback again to be their route of choice. I do think they probably are considering what's available in the draft. And you hit the nail on the head. It has to be perceived by them that particular quarterback is worthy of the 4th pick, not by the rest of us, not by anybody else. And there are many different opinions on these quarterbacks, as you know. Some people say there's one worthy of taking in the top 10. Others have 5 going in the top 10. So usually the truth is somewhere in between. So I think that's why they've kind of left the door ajar. That's why when you hear the Colts people talk a little bit, they're focused on draft stuff now, which I don't doubt that they are. If they swing and miss, or if it doesn't happen, then maybe they consider something for Lamar later on. I think the likelihood of Lamar's deal as a franchise player, non-exclusive, that window is probably best served after this year's draft. 4 teams like the Colts, there might be another team that hops in there as well. But I think there, to answer your question, the veteran route for the Colts, that ship has sailed, and you're right, that's proved to be not their route of choice at this point either.
Let's go additional here. So if the Colts, which are an interesting team and someone that everyone, with what you just said, the lack of veteran success, said, okay, we're going for a rookie. But if we go after the first night of the draft and they choose to do something else, Will Anderson, whatever you want, insert non-quarterback guy, does all of a sudden Randy's eyebrow goes, like Lamar? Or is it just they just didn't have the core? Like those two things don't necessarily have anything to do with each other. They just didn't get the quarterback they wanted.
Well, I think once you get through the first round, all bets are off. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't use – I think they have – and we might have talked about it on the show, like the 35th pick, which is the top pick in the second round.
Top of the second round.
If they don't pick a quarterback first, I could sure see them trying to move back up into the bottom of that first round to grab one if he was available at the right time. I think for me, the guy that comes to mind is the Hooker kid from Tennessee. I think I see him as a starting NFL quarterback at some point. Now he's coming off an ACL, so he's got to get healthy, but his intangibles are awesome. His learning skills are awesome. He can make all the throws. I think he's an excellent choice for somebody later in that first round. And for me, would probably be the 3rd rated quarterback, or the 3rd most likely to succeed as a starting NFL quarterback. So I could see them jumping into that market. Maybe, like you say, they take a Will Anderson, and then I'd start immediately working up from 35 to try to get back as high as I could to, if they shared our view or my view that Hooker is a guy.
Again, that 5th-year option, baby. We've talked about it. It's happened a few times in history. The two that jump out to me, Randy, off the top of the dome is, of course, Lamar Jackson. The Ravens traded back into round number 1. And if we date ourselves back a little bit, relatively speaking, Teddy Bridgewater. The Vikings moved back up for Teddy Bridgewater at the time. So those are two off the top of my head of guys that tried to maximize, again, that fifth-year option from team building perspective. Again, that fifth-year option, if it works out, it obviously did for Lamar. With Teddy, it sort of did, but extenuating circumstances there. Again, the thought process was solid with getting that beneficial with QB salaries and how that's factored into roster construction.
The thing that makes it interesting with the Hooker kid from Tennessee is, he's an older guy already. So he's going to be 26 quickly. So is that good, bad? Do we want a fifth-year deal? He's going to miss this year regardless. I mean, for the most part, coming off the ACL. So you've got to consider this year a wash. Hey, I'm not against the opinion of the ACL might keep him from playing this year, but I'm not sure that's a bad thing. It might help his long-term development in that you can't play this guy. So you can resist the urge to throw him out there now because he's not going to be healthy. I don't think that's bad.
And that's 100% a great point, Randy, because obviously everyone in theory wants to do the Aaron Rodgers of cryogenically freezing a guy for 3 years. Like I think of several players, although tip of the cap to Andy Reid most recently. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes played in that final game because the Chiefs had everything locked up. So he did appear once in his rookie season at the end of the year, but everyone wants to do that. I remember when the Jaguars acquired Blake Bortles and they said, oh, he's sitting the entire year. Well, okay, we see what happens with what we think is going to happen, what actually happens with Hendon. You have no choice. So that forced choice and forced to the fans, right? They won't be banging the table wherever he lands for Hooker. Well, he can't. He's just not medically right. So you are right. That's almost a built-in, I don't want to say excuse, but a built-in factor, which is fascinating.
Which is, I think, great for a quarterback's long-term development. He doesn't have to face the music when he's not ready for it. So I think it's a hidden fact that these quarterbacks need time, and everybody, like you said, wants to do that initially, but guess what? They end up playing them because they're the best quarterback for them right then, and that's why they picked them to start with. I just think it's insurance against yourself and your group rushing him in there may work to his advantage this time around.
Let's get one more here in the offseason musical chairs. Again, it's Boy Green. It's Randy Mueller here for some front office view action. And that was surprising, kind of coming out of nowhere. Tampa Bay Buccaneers linebacker Devin White has requested a trade. He's only 25 years old. He has 1 year left in his deal. That is, of course, the fifth-year option the Buccaneers already exercised for $11.7 million. Are there any teams that seem like ideal fits potentially? Any thoughts on cost? Linebacker trades. Very interesting, especially off-ball linebackers.
Yeah, he's a really good player, but he does play a position that doesn't always get rewarded. And we saw that with the Bears. Is it Roquan Smith when they moved him this year to the Ravens? Yeah, some teams value that position more than others. Usually it's the edge players, it's the rushers, it's the guys who can change and impact the quarterback that get paid. The inside guys, it's a little bit of a struggle. And I think that's probably what you're seeing. He saw what happened to him and how he was rewarded. He figures this is his window of time to try to get that done as well. I don't think Tampa is going to move on this. I don't think they'd ever give him permission to move. I think Tampa is in love with him. I don't know what his reason is for wanting to move, other than maybe he's gone to them about a new deal and they haven't been willing to do it yet. They will in time. I think he'll get rewarded for staying there. I don't think they will take this kid and move him. I think it would cost an enormous amount for another team to acquire him, like a first and something else. And so I don't know that that's ever going to happen. I think this is, again, just one of those things where it's part of doing business with these really good players that sometimes it gets a little muddy. Sometimes it gets a little murky. It's not a distraction to anybody. I know us in the media would like to think it's a distraction, but I've been inside that building. They're not playing any games anytime soon, so nobody's distracting anybody at this point. It's just part of doing business, and sometimes players have to do what they have to do. Agents have to do what they have to do. Sometimes it's making demands. Sometimes it's kicking your feet up and sitting back. In this case, he thinks the timing is right to go, if nothing else, secure a new deal. Maybe Tampa comes in and secures the new deal with them, and this is the motivation that it took to get those negotiations started.
Yeah, it seems like from the reporting, great Jenna Lane of ESPN, who covers the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, she believes this is purely financially driven, and as players enter their fifth-year options, they like to start thinking about the future of getting to those new deals, and apparently some frustration between the Bucs and Devin White, or from Devin White's perspective of getting that new deal. And you did mention Roquan Smith. That ultimately was a second and a fifth from Baltimore, and then obviously they rewarded him handsomely with the brand new deal that put him among the highest paid linebackers in all of football. So two great points there, Randy. Two very good points.
Well, again,
Uh,
it's
yeah.
timing and it's cost of doing business, and it's just part of it. Like I say, sometimes it can be ugly initially, but things will cooler heads prevail, and they'll be able to work something out one way or another. I'm rest assured that's going to happen.
All right, it is time for some draft story time. Oh, I used to love this when I was a kid. We gathered around in a circle. Come on down, kids. We're going to read you something. I don't know if kids still do that nowadays. Maybe on tablets or some sort of, holograms. Not sure what all the kids and the technologies are doing these days. But nonetheless, let's get a little draft story time here, Randy, because I read a beautiful piece. Shout out to Courtney Cronin of ESPN. Got some great stories about really the behind the scenes of a general manager having the number one overall pick and making decisions with it. Ryan Poles was, of course, featured, who traded number one to the Panthers for a package that included number 9. Les Snead on the other side of that, trading up from 15th in the draft a couple years ago to go to number 1. And, of course, Bill Parcells, our very own with the New York Jets, ended up trading that number 1 pick that year. Was very nice with a future Pro Football Hall of Famer. We may know a little bit about who that one was a handful of years ago. So there's a lot of fascinating nuggets in that story, Randy. So just really, I want to kind of open it up here. Not every GM has had the opportunity to have a number 1 pick, but really just that time, trades, draft stuff, like these kind of stories are fantastic.
Well, I've been fortunate to never have the number 1 pick because those are earned, trust me, and they're earned in ways that none of us want to be a part of. So
that's right.
That's the case. I think these 2 things. One, there's been some stories and I'll relay a couple of them that I just still years later shake my head on. But 2, I think people would be shocked at how little conversation happens in a draft room on draft day. In other words, the hay is usually in the barn. In fact, almost every case, there is not a lot of dialogue going on draft day. It is quiet. If you've done your homework, the plan is in place. Everybody knows what's going to happen, or that at least we have a plan for what's going to happen, no matter how the cards fall. So the distractions or the stories or any of that really sometimes can be not true. It's just not a lot of dialogue. But having said that, I've tried to trade up many years. I've tried to trade down many years, and you're a victim of the other side, right? It takes 2 to tango. It takes 2 to dance. You've got to find somebody that you can make a trade with. I'll just give one example. When I went to New Orleans, they had given away their first-round pick for Ricky Williams the prior year, the running back from Texas, in the infamous wedding dress and all those stories. Well, we got there. We had no first-round draft pick. The first pick we had was, I think, the first or second pick in the second round. I tried for about 4 hours to trade from that first pick in the second round to get up in really starting in that top 10 in the first round. So many scenarios, including a first the following year. I was trying everything to get up there. We had a particular player that we really wanted. And as the cards kept falling away, our guy was still there. He was still there. He was still there. I had 15 different teams at some point saying, maybe if our guy's not there. Come to find out, we made no deals. Couldn't trade back into the first round. I've never worked harder in my life on trying to make a trade. That never happened. And guess what actually happened? The player who we identified up there in the top 10 came to us in the second round.
Wow.
So it just goes to show me that sometimes the best deals are the ones you don't make. And I had, everybody patting me on the back for a player that I was willing to give a first round pick the following year to get. That's how smart I was. It just no-brain luck fell on us that day. And it was Darren Howard, a defensive lineman who ended up setting a rookie sack record with the Saints that first year. So things like that happen. I've had deals that I wanted to make where, again, we're going to give away a next year's first round pick to move up in that first round somewhere. And more times than not, a year later, 2 years later, I was so happy we didn't make that deal. We were going to give a first round pick to a team one time, team you're very familiar with and might actually be one of your favorite teams, for a particular player that they had, because we felt like we needed this guy at the worst possible. And we weren't ever going to fill that in the draft. We were going to give a first round pick and our second round pick this year and I'm mumbling here, but it was going to be our first round pick and next year's first round pick. We didn't make the deal. They turned us down. This guy was out of the league 2 years later. So it was the best deal, again, we never made. So these deals are far from an exact science. They sound great. You think in the moment you're going to make the biggest difference in the world by making this deal. It seldom works out like you like. 1 year in Seattle, we traded back 3 times in the first round and got the player that we wanted at the very start.
Wow.
And I would say this, that's why you identify pods of players. Let's say you're picking 15th in the first round. There's probably 4 or 5 players that you're okay with, and that you might, if you don't settle on filling a specific need, you're okay with any one of those 4 or 5 players. Well, I would always try to back up 3 or 4 spots. That pod would follow us. Maybe 2 of the 3 are still there when we back up 3 spots. You don't want to back up if there's only one guy that you want.
Sure.
But one time we backed up 2 different times. We acquired a player, we acquired 2 other picks, and got Pete Kendall, the guard from Boston College who played 10 years for the Seahawks. Ended up, I think, maybe even going to your Jets at some point.
Oh, yeah.
A really good player. So you think you have a plan. You think it's fun to make these deals. But I found more times than not, the deals, you got to be careful. You're going to bite your own leg off by doing something stupid for all intent purposes.
Let me ask you, because you mentioned this calmness in the draft room, which again would go against what we expect, especially for the movie I'll continue to reference, which is one of the greatest cinematic, constructions of all time, which is Draft Day, is that you see the craziness of the pancake eating mother and everything else that goes into that, of people like overreacting to trades, underreacting, the owner bursting in the room, and all this like pomp and circumstance in Hollywood that gets sprinkled in there. So we hear what you just said, and then we see that on TV, go, oh, that must be obviously what really happens. I ask you, is part of the calmness in the room something you've mentioned in Nuggets a few times before, Randy? And that is, you prepare for every crazy scenario with all these wild mock drafts that some people, like Mike Tannenbaum, for instance, former NFL general manager and does great work for ESPN, and former Jets general manager as well. He had Hendon Hooker in his projections. If he was running the shop, he'd have Hendon Hooker 5th overall, and everyone lambasted Tannenbaum for this take. But at the same time, you've almost mentioned that seeing the wildest possible things that can happen, you guys have seen everything. So on draft day, really nothing should surprise you. Does that contribute to that calm atmosphere?
Without a doubt. I think it's just like it equates to taking a test, taking a final in college, or taking the law exam or something like that. If you've studied and if you get it, and if you really are comfortable with the material, the test is a breeze. There's nothing the test can throw at you that you haven't prepared for. And that's what these draft days are. It's like a test. You've been preparing for this 360 days since 5 days after the last one. And so you've had a lot of time to study all the scenarios. And it's another reason why I love to have all those crazy mock drafts the week before the draft brought in, and we're going through every one of them, because it's going to spawn a conversation that we hadn't had yet. The craziest, there's no crazy ideas. I want it all. And you have to discuss this stuff ahead of time. And it also gives you a chance to prepare the people around you, the coach, the owner, everybody else, with some of these scenarios that you maybe as a scouting staff have thought through. But now this is legitimate possibility here. So let's just talk about it. And it allows you to make decisions. There's a lot of public statements being made right now as to this 6 teams called this team, 5 teams called this team. That's all common. Very common. It's not newsworthy at all in NFL circles. This happens all the time. And the reason you do this, the reason you prepare, like I said, to then be able to handle draft day, is you've given all the possible trades in your mind. You've given that conversation to the possible trading partners so they can sort it out as well. Nobody's going to make a deal on the clock in the first round, Paul, in 15 minutes. They're just not. If it's the first time it's been brought up and thought through, they're idiots to make the deal, because these things take a long time to marinate, a long time to vet on both sides. So that's why all these calls have always been made. There may be 10 teams that I'll talk to 2 weeks before the draft, just preparing them. If this happens, think about this. So you're just giving them advance notice that you might call, but they already will have their answer when you call, because you've given them the options. Hey, we'll do this. Would you consider this? All just scenarios painted so that they can make a decision while they're on the clock.
Let me ask you a quick one on that one. That one's fascinating. I've had Mike Tannenbaum on the show before. Is there almost a respect factor for you, Randy? So you call insert team, your team X, their team Y. You call team Y and say, hey, if our guy's on the board at 10, we would love to trade up and it'll be for this and this. And then you guys both kind of handshake. Yeah, that's about what it would take. Yeah, that looks good. And then we get to draft day and then you call them up and they're like, well, yesterday's price is not today's price. Actually, instead of a first and a third, it'll be a first, third, and fourth. If you don't want it, I'll just answer someone else on the phone. Is it just kind of a respect factor among GMs that, like, people you work with before, you just know they're not going to try to do that to you? Or is that like, hey, you kind of take the risk potentially because you didn't really agree to a trade, you just kind of agreed to the general framework? How does that work? I'm fascinated.
I think that the basis behind any of these deals always might include a bluff. I've had teams call me to bluff just what you said, a scenario that, unless you throw in another fifth, we're not going to do it. All right, we're not doing it. But just like any other negotiation, you're gonna call, just like you're playing poker. At some point, you call and put your hands down, and so you've got to have conviction with what you're doing and the price you're willing to pay to do it. And if they alter that a lot, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I'm not going to make a bad deal because a team at the end of the day wanted one more pick or wanted something crazy and to change the dynamics of a deal that, like you said, we didn't make, but we had the parameters set for. That's just part of it. It might go the other way. I think I've shared with you a couple of stories about a trade that I had the night before the draft and walked in that morning and had it nixed, but rekindled it with another team and made the same move for less. So it can go both ways. The price of poker can go up. The price of poker can go down. But again, bluffing is human nature. That's part of what the high stakes are at this level. You have to have a poker face the whole time and be willing to play it out. And the people around you have to understand, hey, this may or may not happen. At the end of the day, Randy's going to pull the trigger. And if he doesn't, it's probably good for us. And there has to be some trust and respect within your own room as well.
I love that. All right, and let's end front office view the way we do every week, and that is with emptying the GM notebook. Some random quick-hitting nuggets from the week that may have caught Randy's eye before we get out of here. And let's go to what you kind of think of this draft class. Randy, I know we're going to get into that obviously deeper. We still have 2 more shows, the show next week and then a show on actual draft day to really dive into this. But some of these thoughts on the draft class, what do you think? Maybe not quite the quality and depth that some people have said in past years?
Well, the more I dig into it and the more film I watch, Paul, and the more people I talk to, I'm not pinning myself up as a draft guru by any means, but I do watch a lot of tape and I know a lot of these players. And I also know a lot of people in the league that have done a lot more work than I have. And in my conversations and the film work that I've done, I think this draft is lacking. I'll be honest with you. I think last year's draft was really good. There was probably 25 players that I was going to be really happy with in the first round. I'm not sure at the end of the day, this year I'll have 10 that I really love. So it is just different. And that varies from year to year. That's nothing new. Sure. It's just the way it is. I think last year, because the 6th year, because of COVID, because of the super seniors, it was a giant class of players. This year, not so much. And so it's just a different quality, a different setup. I had one draft. We drafted Walter Jones and Sean Springs. We said it's a 6-player draft. And we did everything we could to get 2 picks in the 6th round, and it actually worked. We set the limit to ourselves, and I never thought it'd ever come, but it happened that way, where we got 2 of the 6 that we considered a 6-player first round anyway. I think this is one of those years. I don't see a ton of quality. I think once you get outside 10 picks this year, you're going to see teams reaching to fill needs like never before. And that always is a telltale sign for me. When teams start reaching to fill needs, that's the end of the draft. That means the good players are gone, and now we're taking a different approach and serving another agenda to fill out our depth chart.
And so with that being said, how could that affect things, whether in this draft or next draft? So if you think that the quality or depth is lacking in this class, you may be a little bit more willy-nilly to, if you do a trade back, you're like, I don't have to take a pick this year. I could take a pick next year. And also with the other thought that there is a lot of speculation, Caleb Williams of USC, a little Drake May ACC quarterback action, that looks pretty attractive, that when you know in the back of your head that there could be a incredible, interesting class in the future, that could also affect the mentality of trading picks, keeping picks, and moving picks around.
I agree with you totally. I think it also might be an effect, and this will be on draft weekend. Are teams willing to give up picks this year for veteran players during the draft? we get to the third round and I'm saying, oh man, I don't love this at all. Can we go get this guy for a third round pick? Normally I would never do that. And I think teams will be more apt to give up picks this year with, like you said, a trade up. So we're getting rid of our picks. Those 5th, 6th round picks this year that Bill Belichick collects every year might not be as valuable this year, in my opinion. So you might see some of those picks packaged to so teams can move up for a little higher quality player. So I think there's a lot of ways this gets played, but the overlying factor is not a lot of depth, not a lot of volume of players. There's a couple positions, and offensive line is a real struggle for me. Receivers is a real struggle for me. I think it's a really good draft for defensive backs, especially corners. There's 5 or 6 that might be worthy of first round picks. So depending on the position and your needs and how your board stacks up, it's going to be void at a couple of positions that would make me tend to, let's look at some other options. Maybe we sign a free agent that we hadn't planned on. Maybe we give up a pick for a veteran player. Just some different options that teams normally wouldn't look at this time of year, but because they can't fill those needs and spots during the draft, you're going to have to do some things different.
All right, let's go to one more nugget here, and it is on Sean Payton pulling a page out of the old school playbook, I guess we'll call it. And again, if you look at his roots with guys like Bill Parcells and stuff, maybe this isn't as surprising as it should be. But Sean Payton is bringing a little bit something different to the table in terms of some of his restrictions. Randy, what do you make of it, and what more can you tell us about it?
Well, from what I've read and what I've heard, he has put really a media kibosh to everybody around the Broncos organization, including his players. I think he's restricted media coverage for the most part. And I think he's spoken to certain players. I'll leave those unnamed at this point about workout videos at our big fancy homes outside of Denver. All of the stuff that would draw attention to them as individuals and not to the team. I think he's kind of cut off all of that social media stuff to say, hey, we got to do something before we go bragging about what we are or what we have been on social media. So I think I like it. Now, if I was a media member in Denver, I probably wouldn't like it. But at the same time, I understand how he's trying to change the culture, how he's trying to convey to these players that the narrative, I'll control the narrative. You're not in charge. And, I say this tongue in cheek, but I can't help but think he had the quarterback in mind, because I think he's been really conspicuous on social media, and that hasn't been the case in the past. He's always been front and center with all of that stuff. You haven't seen much Russell Wilson stuff out in social media world this offseason. At least I don't think you have. So that's probably where the message comes from, but I like it. And I think it's another reason why Sean Payton was the right guy for this job.
Oh yeah, it's fascinating. I love, again, football is better with Sean Payton in the league. He's one of the best coaches in football, so it's just amazing to see him in here, and it's amazing to see, quite frankly, pulling this wrinkle out. When others are zigging, he seems to zag, and we'll see ultimately what that means. Well, that's going to wrap it up for technically, I guess, the inaugural edition of Front Office View, but we've been doing this for quite some time. A few silver whiskers in my beard, that's for certain. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Guys, you guys can always check this out. We're always in a multitude of locations, including the Heavy on Sports Facebook page, the Heavy on Sports Twitter account, and of course right here, youtube.com/BoyGreen25, everybody. So make sure you guys like the video, hit subscribe down below, and make sure you stay tuned. We have this official playlist now, Front Office View, where you guys can check out every single show. Randy, the countdown continues. Again, we're 2 weeks out from the first round of the 2023 NFL Draft. It's been a lot of fun. It's going to continue to be a lot of fun. And thanks, as always, for taking the time.
Thanks, Paul. Enjoyed it, as always. Look forward to next week.
There he is, Randy Mueller. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you next week.